Hello, dear lurkers, and welcome back to the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. Today we're going to discuss the episode The Coming of Shadows, an important episode, the name-giving episode for this entire season. But before we are going to get deeper into that, we are going to start with our introduction round. Meike, do you want to introduce the question, maybe?
Yes, and I think I should apologize for that at the same time because it was my stupid idea. Because I jokingly said, hey, how about we ask the question of, if you were a nut, which one would you be?
And we all jumped onto that. So, Alex, do you want to start?
Well, I had an entire journey with this one because I want to say macadamia because that's the funniest name for nuts that I remember, but I don't have them often enough. Then I wanted to say peanut, but you are allergic to those, so that doesn't work. So pistachios is where I landed because I really like them and I enjoy that they come with like a little fiddly mini game to open them, so that's nice.
And you, Meike?
Yeah, well, I'm really lucky that he said macadamia nuts, not really fitting because I'm the one with the macadamia nuts, and they are my favorite, and therefore perfectly fitting for me.
If I could be a nut, honestly, I would probably want to be a peanut. Because they taste so good. I've eaten them only a very few times, and my memories are blurry because I was fainting shortly afterwards. I'm so allergic to them. But since I cannot eat them, if I could be them, that would be just as cool.
It will also open so many like options with different sauces and stuff for international cuisine.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, of course, if you can't eat it because it kills you, become what kills you.
Yes, of course.
That's just a good strategy.
Yeah. So, today's episode, The Coming of Shadows. It's an episode where we learn a lot more about Centauri politics, but we see it really deeply from the inside. We see the Emperor of the Centauris visiting the station. Although he's very old and very ill, and it might be one of the last things he does, he knows that right from the start he's still visiting Babylon 5. With his goal in mind to apologize to the Narn. He plans to apologize to Jakar. The Narn on the other side want to revenge themselves and their world. And also Londo and his companions have a few other plans of how to shape the future of the Centauris differently once again. And all of this comes together, and I shouldn't say the ending, right?
Not necessarily.
No, all right. So this is the summary. These are the three things that are
We do have a pretty important side plot there with a mysterious visitor to the station.
Yes, all right. I almost forgot. We are also introduced to the Rangers for the very first. We hear their name, right? Yes, we hear their name. I'm sorry, we hear their name. Who bring us a message from Sinclair, who we haven't seen since the season started, yes. Who also starts to talk about shadows or about the oncoming darkness, something like that. I think shadows hiding everywhere. Yes, that's his words. There's one more person on the station who knows, and the other person is, besides Garibaldi, who saw the message, and the other person is Delenn. So there's definitely a connection between him, the Minbari, and everything that's starting to explode around us in the universe.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So now that the summary worked out more or less, first impressions, Meike.
Yeah, well, exploding is I think quite a good where to start with because it feels like it's. I mean, of course, then it's the name giving episode for the season, but you really feel like, okay, now it starts. Now we get to the real stuff. And yeah, it's starting to get really dark also. I mean, we had this darker moments, but this is like, Coming of Shadows. I mean, it's in the name. But yeah, it's like shit is going to happen. And even though it's not like a action heavy episode, I think the going here is perfectly because it's more on the subtle level and I mean, how does a war start? With little things that build up, and we have this one moment where everything snaps around. And even though there are people trying to prevent this, it doesn't necessarily work every time. And yeah, unfortunately, at this point here, it doesn't work. Though I really appreciate on several parts that they still try.
I think when we're talking about this being an episode where things get a lot darker, that you capture this perfectly, that, yeah, bad things are happening, but a lot of the darkness in this episode, I think, comes from the fact that they are happening in spite of so many people making this best effort. Like, we are on the station that is dedicated to trying to maintain peace in any way, and that mission now has fundamentally failed. And that, for me, is also what I enjoy about this episode the most, even more so than Signs and Portents in the first season, that this is really a shift in status quo. Like, from here on forward, things will feel differently now, because there is fundamentally now a war going on, which wasn't the case before. And this idea that the status quo can change so drastically is still always refreshing. I think that is really where the show enters a different era, rather than the switch from season 1 to 2.
So refreshing. Oh.
Well, the concept more so than the content.
Yeah, interesting. Because, as always, when I'm in this part of season 2, I feel as if I'm impatiently waiting for the magic to start. And by that I mean for the bigger plot to reveal itself, and for the real fire to finally be seen. Because this feels still very much like I'm seeing this recent politics. I'm seeing all of these little conflicts, and one of them just got very, very much more serious and very, very much more darker. But also there's this big mystery in the universe, and I still feel like we are busy with all of our daily life politics. I mean, also a war can be a daily life politics thing. We see that at the moment as well here in Europe. But also there in the show, there is still this big mystery that just cannot just reveal itself and start the next phase, please. That's my feeling. And it was my feeling even when I watched it for the first time, before I knew what was going to come. Which is also, now that I talk about it, actually something that we can talk about at some point deeper, maybe, that while all of this is coming together in the background, that is interesting how the show really tricks you into focusing on these official politics thing while everything is cooking up. I think it's also probably on purpose that we have that we have this perspective. But yeah, so I'm patiently waiting for the whole mystery to unravel. That was my first impression. Okay. Oh no! One more thing to the main plot. Sorry, there of course were moments that actually really got me. That gave me goosebumps. One of those moments was when Sheridan stopped a car, and I totally we can talk about that in detail. But a car in that moment totally got me, as well as the Emperor of the Centauri that we saw. So there are definitely moments that emotionally hit another level than before.
I mean, do we maybe want to start with the Emperor a little bit, because he is our introduction to this episode, and maybe through him we can channel a little bit the status quo that existed before, and then start talking about the big shift that is happening here. And I mean, this is something that Babylon 5 is always praised for, and I think this is a nice occasion to do so again. The consistency of the universe here. Like, we've heard about the Emperor being a thing for the Centauri, but we've also always seen that whenever we are talking about big attacks happening or big politics, they always usually refer to Londo and the Centaurum and the government and such. So there was already this impression that the Centauri Emperor is first and foremost this figurehead, and then seeing him actually and everything that he does in this episode felt very much like, okay, I understand the role that this Emperor takes. He is different from, the Emperor of the Galactic Empire in Star Wars or something like that. But also this sense that I understand what this Emperor is and what he's trying to do, but I also totally see why Jakar, for example, doesn't have that picture at all, does have this idea of this despotic tyrant that is coming to the station. And yeah, seeing these things fall into place is very satisfying to me.
Maybe that's also the part to think about. What kind of function does the Emperor have for the Centauri? I mean, is he actually a politician with a lot of executive power, or is he more of a representative? Do you know that?
I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because we've seen for the first season and a half now that he wasn't super involved. Like, the only time we saw that he actually did something was congratulating Londo to his 30th Ascension Day. So that seems much more what you expect from, a modern-day European monarch who is still around and technically head of the government, but mostly does very symbolic things and maybe is involved in very big symbolic things to do with, like, past wartime and such. So this is definitely something, but we've also seen, especially in this episode, Lord Orifa talking about the fact that the Emperor is feeble and old and doesn't do so much. So I think it's very possible that this Emperor took this figurehead position, but also because he deliberately didn't use a lot of the power that maybe technically he has. So I could imagine if he really wanted to, he might be able to, throw around a lot more authority, but at least this one hasn't done so for a long time.
I mean, he himself is praising that he took this role that was prepared for him, that he did what was expected of him. So it doesn't feel like there was, like he had a deciding position, but more of a bit more of a puppet role he is playing there, with little tidbits he's given away, like, congratulations, and you have a wish free if it's in my power. So I could imagine that the role overall, or the position of emperor, is actually quite strong one, but that it was in his case, or over the time, has been deconstructed in some way or another.
And some of the scenes where he talks about this being this puppet and such is, for example, the discussion that he has with Sheridan in the little dome, which I really like their interaction there. It's also one time where we learn a little bit more about what Sheridan was taught about how to conduct his life and such. So I think we just recently talked about this in earlier episodes. So I appreciate that we get more insight there. But overall, just like looking at this episode as a whole, it baffles me every time how much of a sympathetic character the Emperor is. And I just say that because Babylon 5 is a show which in its first season did a big Union episode about power to the people and all that. It's not a kind of show where I usually expect, the author going around and saying, hey, look at this absolutistic ruler of this evil regime that we've talked about multiple times. Isn't he a sympathetic character? So I think that's an interesting decision to make him somebody that we are definitely rooting for here.
But we also learned that in the past 100 years, the Centauri lost their old influences, their old sizes of an empire, and there was a politic of retreating more and more, and that we have these younger generations. I mean, Londo is not so young, but also a lot of in the younger generation, or not as old as the empire at least, who miss the old glory and miss the old days. And since we know that in the past 100 years, this glory more and more disappeared, that is more or less the reign of this empire, of this emperor, right? Maybe even
largely so, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you have someone who even is just in a symbolic situation, but gives speeches and motivates people to follow this course, then he has more of this indirect power. But if you think of, I mean, in Germany we also have a president, but he doesn't rule the country as a president. The chancellor is ruling the country, and the president is basically a symbolic figure, but he has the power to give speeches and to influence situations and to give guidance of some kind. And so someone like that can really have this imprint on the whole Centauri empire that the younger generation was trying to get rid of, sadly.
And I think in this regard, it fits the whole idea, the whole theme that Babylon 5 usually promotes quite well, because then you get into this idea of history isn't usually a history of great men, even though we usually try to tell it that way. But here you have this situation where he is probably the most influential man in the entirety of Centauri kind, and even he cannot single-handedly turn everything around. It seems he has been doing a lot. He has been following trying to moderate and trying to make up with the Narn in some fashion, but even then, he really only feels empowered to do so right before the very end. And for so long, this entire Centauri regime, even though the Emperor himself isn't fully supporting that, has been still moving in this direction of yearning for the old glory and such. And it very much goes in this idea like, sure, individual figures can have a lot of influence, they can sway a lot of things, but ultimately history isn't made by individual people. It's always a bigger thing, and that's so hard for him to move against.
Yes, and also that the voices can change. I mean, you can have someone like a president or like a monarch who can give these symbols, and then a few decades later, someone else is louder and more responding to the situations. Yeah. Do you have a specific point about the empire? Because about the emperor, emperor. What's that? Because I have a specific one I would like to start with.
I mean, I have one from the very beginning where I do really love, in general, I love the actor for the Emperor. I think he does a tremendous job imbuing this character that we see for the very first time with a lot of gravitas. And in the very beginning, there's this small scene where he rejects the entire Centauri hairdo, which makes him also look a lot more human throughout the entire episode, which I think is yet another way of making him more relatable to us as the audience. And I really like this element that, for one, we finally get confirmation, yeah, the Centauri don't have to have their hair like that. It's a choice, and you can reject that choice. And there's also this very tiny tidbit here that the Centauri women do shave their heads. It's not natural for them to be bald all the time, and it has like this cultural significance of, okay, they are not part of this world of high status and stuff, so they shave their hair off, which is a symbol for that, which is a very small tidbit and tells us a lot about Centauri society and the position of women in that, because they're just precluded from the entire idea of the big authority figures.
What I think is really interesting of this is that it's the women do this. So even though you have this power position that we learn through Lando's wives, it kind of suggests that most women do not have power.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, what is the reason to choose a way to get out of society? So most of the time it's we don't have power, we are not heard, and therefore, we take the chance of an exit strategy. And to me, in this position, in this moment, it feels for me like it is an exit strategy for the women to get out of the system.
Yeah.
Yes, and it also reminds me a lot of these parallels that we've drawn already in the first season a few times between the Centauri society and Europe in the 18th century, because a lot of things that are now typically women were done by men back then because they meant power and strength. Like when you look at old paintings from the 17th, 18th century, men wear higher heels to look taller, and today you don't see men in high heels that often in Europe anymore. So that these things are copied in that way into the society to show kind of in what kind of way it works. I like that.
Yeah, and just this little insight that there is, you can have these elements in this society and you don't make the entire episode about it. It's just something that you say on the side, but it gives you this hint of, okay, there is a larger society there. And just also this reminder of, okay, for us as humans, it's like, oh, it's an old man, he's bald now. To any Centauri, he looks like a woman now because he doesn't have the big hairdo. And it will just have a different significance to them. And I love that this is one of these subtle ways to introduce aliens in the Babylon 5 universe have a different perspective on things, and symbolism is going to work differently for them, and we just always recognize that. We don't always have the context for that. But you also had a point about the Emperor.
Yes, I mean, I think maybe we all want to, in more detail, maybe talk about the apology that he was trying to make and how that works and whatever. I think that's also very interesting, but before we do that, I would like to talk about something else, and that is that his biggest wish in the end was granted. The Vorlon visited him. Kosh paid him a visit, and Kosh told him something about the future that we don't know if he was able to connect to anything or understand. But, this goes a little bit deeper into the world building. I have to be careful not to spoil anything, but we know that the Vorlons, or Kosh at least, and we can assume that it's the opinion of the Vorlons in general, are not very interested or not even very fond of both the Narn and the Centauri. If we remember one of the first conversations that Sinclair had with Kosh that we saw, where he talked about the conflict between these two races, and Kosh just said, "It's a dying people.
Yeah.
Why do you care? Basically, why do you care? They're not going to last anyways." And so yeah, there was never really, for their species and for their cultures, never much interest, and still this individual was visited by him. The wish was granted, and he told him something. So what I thought in that moment was that maybe Kosh also saw this kind of person that he was, and saw the insight the emperor at the end of his life had gained, although he came from this culture that he was not interested in at all, and still recognized this individual as interesting, and therefore paid him the visit. That's how I saw that scene.
There's going to be a really good segue in this later on, but I really love that you mentioned Kosh, because Kosh is still part of the show, everybody. I don't know if you remember him at all, but yeah, he's still here, and
not just trolling around, obviously.
Exactly. And the point you make, like the episode even emphasizes this more, where you have the big diplomatic reception, and Sheridan even mentions, man, I really hope that this was a big enough deal for Kosh to come out. And he doesn't. He doesn't care about politics as such and big diplomatic events.
Well, I would say specifically about this one.
Yeah, especially about this like bickering conflict for like more than 100 years. But then when it's about a personal favor, he's willing to do that. And I think that is something that we've seen in Kosh before. Like, Kosh doesn't care about first contact with any kind of aliens. That's not important to him. But when the parents of a sick child come to him, he's willing to listen them out and give them some cryptic advice about it. So he's somebody, if it's a personal affair, you can actually talk to him. It's just, don't start talking about politics with him. He's just going to shut down his suit and go away.
Is that all? Yeah, can you think of another example yet? Because I don't know if that's really all his opinion on politics, or just on specific politics.
Maybe just on specific politics.
Yeah, because overall, I think the interesting part is you just said, Layla, that the Narn and the Centauri are obviously not in the political department of interest to Kosh or the Vorlon, but the Vorlon came to B5. Either it's, well, I don't want to put the arrogance card with the humans out, but is it the humans? Is it this constellation? Is it what they are trying to do? There has to be something in all of this that makes it interesting, or maybe even important to them, considering how his first appearance on B5 went with poisoning. I'm not sure if I wouldn't have packed up my stuff and would have left in the same direction I came from, but he is staying, and there has to be something that is important, interesting there for him personally, or for the Vorlon overall.
And the question very fairly is that one of the species? Is it humanity? But I would also posit the question, is it maybe just one specific human or person or such? Because if we remember back to the Minbari funded a good chunk of Babylon 5 because they were interested specifically in Sinclair, and then demanded that he was put on a station with them. I would argue it wasn't so much about humanity as a whole, as much as it was about this one specific human that they got really, really interested in. And I could imagine that, maybe for the Vorlons it's a similar thing. If they have one specific person that they want to stay close to, maybe that's enough to keep Kosh there.
Well, I'm not sure if you could really go this way with the Minbari and the humans, or with Sinclair, considering this overall idea of there are Minbari souls reborn.
There is certainly more behind that. That is true.
More gateway for the bigger idea.
So maybe, to be fair, I should say not just one human, but there might be one human specifically here on Babylon 5 that they want to be specifically around.
So we don't know enough about Kosh to know his opinions on diplomacy, on certain old conflicts that are going on in our galaxy, but we know that he definitely visits the Emperor, who has become a special kind of Centauri for him, apparently, maybe, probably. A Centauri who has point of views that not many Centauris share, or even any Centauris share at this point. And we don't know this for sure, but I would just utter this idea here. No, she's destroying my sentence. Just utter this idea here that he maybe one thing that makes the emperor so special is his attempt to apologize for the things that his race, his species, his culture has done to the Narn in the past. And maybe we could talk about this apology and how they work and what kind of symbol they can be and how they can be done. Maybe we can talk about that for a second, because this happens in our world constantly as well. And maybe you should say something first before I go on forever about this.
I would love to talk about the apology. Maybe we can touch before a little bit on the interaction that Sheridan and Jakar have regarding the apology, because I think that provides some context. But before we leave Kosh's interaction with the Emperor behind, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, Kosh isn't exactly super kind to the Emperor in granting this wish, right? Isn't his answer to the big question, how is all this going to end, the answer in fire?
Yes, but I mean, okay, that's not very kind, but it's probably just honest.
I mean, it is honest. It's probably also something that the Emperor understands, but I think it once again just solidifies. That is so smart with the cable. You're doing so well. It solidifies that the recording is still on. It solidifies this idea that Kosh is going to grant you your wish and visit you on your deathbed, but he's still not going to sugarcoat anything. He's going to tell you how things are, and he's not going to be particularly less cryptic about it, which I appreciate about him, I guess. But yeah, Kosh recognizes that this Centauri Emperor is very special because he wants to grant this apology. And yeah, the big other point is Jakar and Sheridan have a big discussion about opening up a dialogue between these two peoples. And I don't know how you felt about this. Maybe this can be part of another first impression here. But I was originally, and I am still surprised at how harsh Sheridan actually is about this, where he says, I appreciate how hard this is for you now, but honestly, not my problem. You are going to suck it up and fix this situation, or you're going to stay in your quarters and be silent about it. And maybe we can talk about this a little bit, because we have now both sides that are trying to, open up a dialogue or being asked to open up a dialogue. And yeah, I have some opinions about that.
About Sheridan's harshness?
About all sides of it.
I mean, to Sheridan's harshness, I have to say that I understood him, actually, because I think it's also to a big degree his responsibility that no more damage is done and no more harm is done, and that he has to make sure that no Narn starts murdering any Centauri on his station. And in his harshness, I just saw this nervousness of, oh God, I have to get Jakar under control. How the hell do I do that now? And although he might even on some personal level understand or at least have an understanding of some kind for the situation Jakar is in, even an emotional one, he still has to keep everyone safe. And that's a tough thing to do at this point.
Well, what hooked me was the point that Sheridan was like, but the Emperor, yet try again. What hooked me was that Sheridan is stating that the Emperor that is visiting or about to visit wasn't the one who attacked the Narn, that didn't enslave them, that didn't all these horrible things. Maybe he didn't do much good, or maybe nothing at all. But to measure him with the same aspects that did the Emperor before is just wrong, because it's not about the situation itself. It's just like holding a grudge, and that's not that doesn't get you anywhere. I'm not sure really how to phrase this, but it's like hating you have this neighbors, and like he was rude to you and therefore you hate his wife. That's just stupid because one can't do anything for what the other did. Of course, you have this overall connection and therefore responsibility, but you can't go with the same aspects to a different person. Even though he is putting his foot out and saying, hey, I apologize. I didn't do anything of this, but I apologize. And therefore, even the impact, at least in my opinion, is so much bigger because I take the responsibility of those before me.
That's the point we have to talk about later, definitely, about this kind of responsibility, but you wanted to say something else.
I'm as always tempted to play the devil's advocate here, and in this case a little bit of Jacquard's, but maybe to start with Sheridan's harshness here, I really like, Layla, how you put it, how he has this responsibility to the station, even if he wants to be sympathetic to Jacquard to a certain degree, he can't. And I think his harshness here also very much feels appropriate to his background, because to me it looks like he's approaching this conflict between the Narn and the Centauri like he would approach a personal conflict as a captain of a starship. If you have two officers that were just fighting each other in the casino, you sit them down and you tell them, I don't care who started it, what matters is that you suck it up and you deal with this right now because this ship needs to function. I have no time to go through with you through all the history that you maybe have. Just deal with it and let's go forward. We can't have a cycle of violence here, which in his position as captain of the Agamemnon makes perfect sense to me. And if we start doing parallels like you, Meike, also open up, imagine you have a conflict with your neighbor, then this makes perfect sense and I can see the logic behind that. What I would argue is that once you start going in the realm of international or interplanetary politics, it gets a bit different. If I'm mad at my neighbor's wife because her husband was mean to me, I'm being an asshole. I have no reason to do that. If I'm mad at any kind of Centauri because their parents did something wrong, I'm an asshole. It's not their fault. If I'm looking at the emperor of the Centauri, however, I could argue, well, but that's his job. His entire purpose is being a representative for the Republic as a whole. And it would be a big problem if I say, well, the old emperor who was responsible for all the war crimes died. His son didn't do them, so I guess we can't hold anybody accountable for that anymore. I think if I view the emperor as this avatar of the Centauri people as a whole, I could see how one would argue, well, it sucks that he personally has no fault in this and has to carry this now, but that's literally his job as the emperor. That's what he's there for, and that's the value in a position like that. And I think, at least to some degree, this is what you see in real life with, representative roles like the German president. Like the German president is going to go around and he's going to go to ceremonies regarding World War II. And of course...
Now you're stealing a lot of points, actually.
I'm sorry.
Because I wanted to say something to the other stuff that you said before.
That's okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, since you commented on my comment.
I'm going to shut up for a long time after this point. Just this idea, you have these representative roles where, of course, always you can say, well, this person personally didn't do it, but it is part of their job in there. And now I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, yeah.
Just short of version to my comment. Of course, a nation is something different as like your neighbor. Yeah, it's not about forget and forgive, but I think the overall problem is if you put the past too high, you will never get to the point of talking or even a solution. You will just carry it on and on and on, and this is like this. If you have in our reality, if you have wars or conflicts that continue over 100 years, then, well, technically, the chances are really high that people who started this conflict are no longer there. And the people who carry this conflict out, maybe they don't even know what it's about. They just do it because the ones before did it. And I think this whole structure is so problematic. Of course, it's really hard to go beyond your emotion if something so terribly happened to you, to your people. But yeah, you need to calm down, because if you just act on your emotions, there is no chance of freedom, of living, of anything. And yeah, that's what I was trying to say, I think.
And that's perfectly valid.
Yeah,
And
that's another interesting point that we also can talk about later as another discussion point of this episode. How do we break this cycle of violence? What should happen that this could actually stop? Because it has to stop at some point. At some point, people have to decide to find another solution. But what I also find important when you think about confronting this emperor or any centauri who is alive today, who wasn't alive during the original reign of terror or now, and any centauri from now, that you of course could always say it was their grandparents or their great-grandparents or whatever who did these things. But you also have to then think about these people are still to a certain degree a product of this culture, and then you have to think about how good has this culture cleaned up with their past? Has there been any kind of remorse, any kind of official apologies, any kind of new education, or do you still have centauri that are fascists towards Narn? That is a big question. And that is, I mean, yes, we live in Germany, for example, and our whole educational system has been vastly restructured after World War II for reasons, because you could not keep any of the school books, you could not keep the teachers in place. I mean, sometimes we did. It's not impractical. It's not always as easy to change all of these things. But because the basis for a conversation with the world again was to show that there is this clear cut and that the new people are not going to be influenced by these old ideologies. And if that has not happened, then you have the danger of having these fascists and these same mindsets, although it's new people.
And I think this is where the lack of communication between the non-Centauri really takes center stage, because this seems to be something that Jakar, for example, is really not aware of. Like Meike, you mentioned, when the Emperor starts stepping out and tries to issue an apology, you have to be able to look past your emotions and accept that. And this is another point in this episode where I'm consistently surprised that Jakar is surprisingly willing to do that. When he is in the quarters and gets the message from Franklin that the Emperor wanted to apologize, I'm interested to hear your opinions on that, but to me, this feels actually very genuine, that he is in this shock of, oh my God, I was about to murder this man. I had no idea that he could actually want to apologize. It just didn't occur to him. And obviously also on Jakar's side, there is a certain level of willingly looking past that and not really looking for that apology, but there is also this spark of, okay, there is this like short time frame in this episode where Jakar has learned that this potential for an apology is here, and then he is willing to pick that up.
I mean, the impact of an apology or a gesture that is driven from this emotion in this direction, for me, I have to think of the knee fall of our one of our chancellors, Willy Brandt, that went to Poland and visited this memorial for all the people who died, and how it really went, if it was orchestrated like planned, or if it was a spontaneous action, as he always stated, doesn't matter. He did this in front of, I'm not sure, was it video cameras, or at least a lot of people. There was a photo that went around the world, and I think it's like that a lot of people forget what it means to receive an honest and deep apology, what this can do to the people around you, and of course what it takes to apologize.
And I think...
And I also have to say that in general, he then or at least it's my personal opinion, that as an international community, you are always very interested in having peace, of course, and not having ongoing wars, ongoing conflicts. But it's my opinion that to judge how honest, how genuine, and how when an apology is enough and can be trusted and is accepted, for me, should always be to a big amount the decision of those who suffered the most and of the victims. And I think that, so that should definitely be watched over by, I don't know, people on Babylon 5 or whatever, if such a conversation could happen. But I think it should be a very intimate and personal dialogue between Nahn and Centauri. That's my opinion.
And I think this, in total, like the value of an apology might be the big tragic lesson that the Emperor learns far too late. Because from what is said in this episode, this Emperor has tried to make policy that isn't expansionist, that maybe tries to give back to the Nahn a little bit. And all of that is true, and all of that is something that Jakar also knows, and what he calls a technicality, alongside the fact that this Emperor personally wasn't responsible for things. All these actions are fine and good, but what really rattles him is the apology. Having all the diplomatic elements and such, that's all fine and good, but that's politics. What he needs is this apology, really. And I think if the Emperor had known that before and done his apology 20 years ago and then spent the time doing the politics behind that, maybe this would have been enough to lay the groundwork for an actual peace here, and it wouldn't have been this like last-ditch effort to try to prevent a war just before it's about to break out.
And I mean, also maybe it's also difficult to get to this point of actually stating such an apology, because I think it's difficult to find the right words, to find the right moments, because also you are always then, like we also stated, you are apologizing for something you have not done yourself, or something you haven't even seen yourself. How much responsibility can you actually take? Like, even if you want to, how authentic can it be? How can you apologize for something you were not even there for? And also, I had another point that just slipped my mind. So I definitely see why it is difficult to orchestrate, to find the right words, the right moments, because it's a super abstract thing. You are basically also just apologizing for a responsibility you were born into, although you really didn't ask for it. So,
and if we're looking at this element of, international community, one thing that we see with ongoing conflicts and in historical ones is that a lot of times you also get into this mindset that Sheridan very much embodies, of where I've just taken command of the station, here is this ongoing conflict, the Nahn have attacked the Centauri are attacking the Nahn back, all of this is happening, all I want is for somebody, and I don't care who, to just, sit down and find a different way. And I think what this episode illustrates is kind of the problem where, okay, it's easy to be on the outside looking in and say, this has been going on for a very long time. It's a very complicated history. Just somebody stop it. Somebody turn the other cheek and fix it. But in reality, of course, there are important power dynamics here. Like in the conflict between the Nahn and the Centauri, Sheridan goes to Jakar and asks him, why don't you just open up a dialogue? And that's a very difficult thing to ask, because these two aren't evenly matched. For the Nahn, for all we've seen in these 1.5 seasons, standing up to the Centauri is a matter of survival. It's all their entire military and being revolves around. This is why they invest everything in attacking Ragesh 3. And then from the Centauri perspective, it's, we lost an agricultural colony that is so unimportant we don't even bother to send our army there. So it's not equal terms here, and so it's much, much harder for somebody to like Jakar to then be told, well, why don't you just accept that you have to set aside violence for once and just find another way?
And also when you just see him standing there in the hallway, how he's shaking, how he's screaming, he is not rational anymore. You really see just this impact, this warhead, and this struggle for survival. That is, I mean, it is always, it's not so nice in this discussions to bring people down to their own personal experience or their own emotional range, but I think that is still a kind of horror that maybe Sheridan cannot really think himself into, because I think, I still think it was a completely different level of how he experienced the Minbari War. Probably, I think this Jakar you see in that moment, that was intense.
But I mean, the Minbari War is a nice point. Like, puts Sinclair or Sheridan on the battle of the line and tell them, oh, this cycle of violence that you have with the Minbari isn't healthy. Why don't you just send a message and open up a dialogue with them? Like, good luck trying to accomplish that. Like, it's too much of an ask at that point. I mean, this is what we even like talked about last week. If you have a group of people like the rogue telepaths that is pushed to such a point where all the like non-violent options are not really viable anymore, that becomes a harder and harder ask. Whereas I appreciate how hard it must have been for the Emperor to personally get to the point where he can issue this apology, but all things aside, like, the safety of his homeworld is never in the same kind of jeopardy doing that.
Although I think we have different position dynamics here. When Sheridan or Sinclair, they were in battle, they did actively something, while Jakar here has more of a passive action. Of course, he is able to do things, to delegate things, to handle certain things, but it's not that you see a direct impact of the things you do, which is a big problem. And because he is in this passive situation, especially with what is happening here on colony 14? No.
14 is correct. Quadrant 14.
Quadrant 14. He's helpless and hopeless in this moment. And of course, in this situation, everything just crashes down. There is no place to calm down, no space for thinking and meditating your emotions. And yeah, of course, in this moment, he's really lucky to have Sheridan here to stop him.
And especially, like, by the time we're talking about the destruction of Quadrant 14, he's also in this position where, okay, I tried everything else. So I was even open to drinking with Londo Mollari on this. Like, he did actually break the cycle of violence and set everything aside and swallow his pride and do that. And yeah, if after that moment you get confronted with a willful continuation of the cycle of violence again, then there is very little that you can be asked to do at that point. So at that point, any kind of Sheridan, yeah.
What really kicked hard for me was when, after the drinking, Jakar gets the information and saying like, something like he drank with me and he knew it.
Yeah.
And I totally felt this betrayal because, yeah, in this moment where he was like, hey, okay, let's put it aside. Let's look into the future. And then he was literally stabbed in the back. I really felt this.
Especially because at this point it is an escalation from before. Like, the Narn and the Centauri have always been fighting each other. Londo and Jakar never were friends. But at least there was always this level of, okay, we know we hate each other and we will yell at each other that we want to kill each other and like fight out this war. This level of betrayal is something worse even still, where it's now taken to a level where it doesn't play by these old rules of at least some baseline of respect anymore.
But maybe we should still talk about the decision the Narn make in the end, that they declare war on the Centauri. Because the Centauri have, as far as I understand, have not yet at that point been ready to declare war or to even start a full-scale attack of some kind. They were just partly, by little bits, stealing their territory back. So what do we think about the decision of the much weaker Narn to declare war and to escalate it completely right in that second?
I mean, there is a level of, it depends what the Narn know that they're capable of, right? But if we are in this situation where the Narn are the underdog, it is understandable insofar that they say, okay, all we can do is punch as hard as possible, as early as possible, and get as much sympathy from everybody else to somehow like resolve this before it gets really, really bad, because they probably know if this is going to turn into a long protracted war, we're not going to win this. And oh well, isn't that a situation that is applicable to real life? So yeah, there's definitely this level of it's a kind of now or never moment. And I think it's telling also how Jakar delivers this point where declaring war is this solemn duty that he has now. This is no like grand bravado like they had when they were rushing Ragash 3 and taking back some territory.
Yes, I definitely saw that, but I am always torn when I hear them declaring war, because I feel like at that point it is certain that they are losing, because I don't see enough support for Narn from the galactic community we have on Babylon 5. And I just see that they feel that it's their duty, and also see this need to escalate it right now, to not wait for the big disaster much longer. But I feel that there is basically no good outcome for Narn, and I think, as far at least as we know Jakar, that he knows that, but thinks that it is necessary for any kind of future that still is there. So that's also a moment that always hits me in the stomach very hard.
I think the level of desperation is after this big colony of the Narn is taken down is just so high that it's, they are really standing close with their back to the wall, and they are trying just to do something and not just passively sitting turn into sitting ducks.
And I think a big part of this is also that Jakar knows something is wrong. The Narn knows something is wrong, because these attacks, especially on Quadrant 14, should not be possible. This is something that the Centauri aren't technically capable of. And we as a viewer know, no, they are not. This is like Londo packing out his Joker card once more and basically doing space magic to delete things that he doesn't want to have in the universe anymore. And so I think this also plays into it. It's just this panic of the Centauri are doing something that should not feasibly be possible. And we don't have anything against that. So what can we do? Well, I guess mobilize. I guess just try and hit them where it hurts, because they're playing with so many unknowns that sitting around really isn't an option.
I think this is the moment to point out to Vir and his ways of trying to stop Lando, because honestly, I think we have never seen him so emotionally on one hand, and on the other hand, really strong in the way he is voicing his thoughts. And also after Lando has done what he thought he had to do, this passive aggressive sitting of Vir when I think Rafta was the other Reefer. When he was like handing him the glass, like, hey boy, put this away from me, and Vir's just sitting there doing nothing. I think this is a really strong moment.
And I think it gets even stronger contrasted with the fact that Reefer and Londo have this like initial discussion about their plan. And I don't know if we have time for this today, but I think Reefer's plan before knowing what Londo can do is actually also quite clever, like with the prediction stuff and such. But we have this wonderful discussion there. Reefer is just openly discussing his plan, not even paying mind to Vir at all, because Vir is so unimportant that it doesn't matter if you overhear something that could be construed as conspiracy or something like that. And I think this, alongside the death of the Emperor, really puts Vir in this position where Vir has to understand in this episode, as a representative of the Centauri, as somebody in a political function, he can't do anything. He has so little power that nobody even cares if he listens. So at that point, I think, is where he makes the switch and just says, okay, I can't do anything on any other level, so I'm just going to be on my personal level. I don't care what the Reefer does anymore. I'm not going to take his glass away. I'm openly going to talk to Londo about this, because there is nothing left to do. I can't like wait around and hope that I rise to a position of influence where I maybe can sway things on a political level. Such, no, that's out of the window. Things are happening too fast. So yeah, all he can do is stand up for himself. just as an individual, and he's doing that in such a big way. And yeah, that's, like you say, it is such a strong moment for him. It makes you very proud to see that there are upstanding Centauri out there, even if they are not in the right positions right now. I'm interested to see if we have something to talk about when it comes to Londo's side of things, because we have discussed previously how much is Londo already in over his head, how much is he just trying to survive, and how much is he playing politics here. And I think this episode is the first time where it really feels strongly like, okay, he's not just in over his head, he's actively utilizing his associates now to his own advantage, and he is playing his trump cards for politics, and he doesn't feel great about it at any point. I think at multiple points in this episode you kind of see the horror of being aware of what he's doing, but he's now put himself in this position where he can excuse it as things are already set in motion. I can't do anything. I'm just a pebble that is already rolling, as Kosh would say. And I think you really start to see the way he rationalizes things, of portraying himself as just somebody who is swept up in the history of things that was inevitable.
And also, if you're looking, or if we are looking at the dream he has, where he is crowned emperor, and the next scene he is sitting there old, and then a really distorted version of Jakar appears and starts choking him. And finally, when later Veer is saying, "I thought you would ask for being promoted into the board so you can become the emperor," and where he is giving this really weird answer, like, "Yeah, I have the same winnings, but less. It's less dangerous," and it feels like he is desperately trying to evade this situation that he has seen in his dream by not becoming the emperor.
And I think this is kind of his theme here, right? He has maybe his visions, maybe his dreams, his ability to have this vision of his own death is more a curse than anything, because it instills in him this feeling of history is inevitable. And I think this is how he goes about this entire episode. He goes into this thinking a war between the Narn and the Centauri is always going to happen. It's an inevitable truth of the universe that we are going to fight each other. So honestly, it's not that bad if I am the one starting it off, because it would have happened anyway. And I think this is also why Jakar's interaction with him is so unsettling to him, because for a moment there is this glimpse that no, this war wasn't inevitable. If he had just not done this and let the Emperor speak his apology and stuff, things could have turned out differently. And I think any time this vision of the universe is predetermined and I can't do anything, I can't affect anything really, so I can never have responsibility. Anytime this is chipped, we see Londo really struggling with that reality. But then he goes back into these visions and says, well, no, I'm destined to be killed by Jakar at some point, so it doesn't really matter what I do along the way.
Yeah, it's more like he's kind of trying to manifest this vision to on the other hand, say, hey, I can't. I was just another victim of history.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, we have already talked about this moment, but now that we may talk about Londo's point of view, I think it is interesting to see in the next developments what kind of an impact it had on him that he saw that a friendship with Jakar would actually be possible. That there were these few moments in this for this one drink where Jakar was actually positive and happy and forgiving towards him. Because if you have this point of view where you just see yourself as playing along in this inevitable plan that the universe has for you, just seeing things as given, as the Centauri have to hate Narn and they have to kill each other and whatever, and then you see this unexpected turn of events, and you have this glimpse of a moment where someone who deeply hates you becomes your friend. I think it's interesting to see what both of them make out of it, because if you are in this situation, if you grew up in a culture where these two sides are completely firm against each other, and you have this one moment even though it is destroyed right afterwards, that can still leave a strong impact.
And I think this is where we mentioned, like you mentioned, especially like the background, your culture and stuff matters, and also how much this culture reckons with the past mistakes. We can see how everything about Centauri culture puts Londo in the worst possible position, because he had these moments with Jakar before where they were sitting in a bar and enjoying alcohol and women and they were buddy-buddy. But you can also see how for Londo it was always clear, but that's a mask that we wear, right? Like, this is what Centauri do. We wear masks of all things. So if Jakar sits there with me and is buddy-buddy with me, that must have been a mask. And so having this drink with him in this episode now, realizing, oh no, that could have been genuine, is something that there is no room in his culture for that somebody as genuine as Jakar, and we've been talking about this again and again, could exist. And so I think, this is once again why this rattles him so much, because unfortunately, everything he has been taught in his culture kind of goes in the exact opposite direction and makes it so unlikely for him to get to this point of understanding. It's tragic, because you see that Londo would be capable of getting that. He's just never quick enough about it.
And I mean, even if you think about it, his position is like connecting to other cultures. He would have had the chance of learning new things to get a new perspective on things, but he didn't learn. He just concentrated on his ways, the ways it always was, and therefore didn't give room for other ways, for other options, for peace.
We talked a little bit already about the declaration of war, but there is a small side element to that from Sheridan's side, where he is now confronted with the reality that peace is not really an option. This attack has happened now, and we get an insight into something that I don't think I've ever seen in any kind of other science fiction setting or just in general depiction of war in fictional settings. This idea of there is this planet, it has been conquered now, there's a bunch of civilians there, which we usually don't want to talk about because that's unsavory when it comes to warfare. And Sheridan is like, we would like to send international observers there because something weird happened. We would like to do that. And this is something he has threatened before with Ragesh 3, or Sinclair threatened with Ragesh 3, and now Sheridan is doing it here. I really like this as an element of the Babylon 5 universe, that the international community actually matters, and sending observers somewhere who could reveal what things are going on does actually matter. It's a powerful thing.
I mean, it just shows what I said a few times when we discussed the first episodes, that we are here at a place where the international community is just going to be developed. So the intergalactic community is just going to grow and just going to learn its functions. And here we see an attempt to do that, an attempt to have a neutral kind of institution that has a view on things, or we see at least the strong need for that. So, we are at this interesting development point.
And I mean, talking about the relevance of Babylon 5, this is just something that I would like to throw in as maybe a point of discussion, maybe just a point to keep in mind for the future. But I wonder, at least as far as I see it, it feels to me like when Babylon 5 was written, there was much more of a sense that we have achieved that level of international community, that there was this idea, you have the UN now, we are at the point where, something like in this episode usually couldn't happen anymore because we do have this forum now where we actually have these relations developed. And it does feel to me, at least in recent years, that there is a more and more of an awareness that maybe our current United Nations model and stuff is more in a place of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds of still having to develop than maybe we admitted to ourselves.
Would you say that that writer was that genius in the 80s and 90s? Because I can't tell. I could also imagine him being someone looking at the collapsing Soviet Union, looking at Yugoslavia, for example, and be like, oh, holy shit.
Yeah, but I mean, this is exactly what I'm saying, where I think this writer already pointed out, hey, maybe developing international relations is still something that we should think about and point out, because And now 30 years later, it turns out, oh yeah, he was kind of right about that. It didn't work as smoothly as we maybe imagined.
Probably, yeah.
I wouldn't point it in the direction of a closed thing or in the direction of a naive intention there. I would more say consider it as a projection of hope. There is a way that we can go. We just have.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think this entire episode lands on this idea that no, this war wasn't inevitable. It is not something where you can just resign yourself and say, well, it doesn't make any sense to have this kind of international peace station because it's never going to work anywhere. He does point us in the direction of saying, no, this could have worked. It's worthwhile having made this attempt, even if it does end in tragedy, because it's not how Londo wants to put it in history, where things just have to repeat themselves and there's nothing you can do. Now, on the side of hopeful messages, do we want to talk about the mysterious visitor to the station a little bit? There's not a huge amount here, but it is somewhat significant that we see him, and depending on how much attention you pay to the background of previous episodes, you might have seen them actually before here and there popping in and out of the station, so it's finally addressed what these weird robed figures mean.
Okay, I have to say, I didn't realize them so far. If they were there, they were perfectly hidden to my eyes. I'm though not really sure what exactly is their job other than running around and getting information. And since this whole, it's a really mysterious pact, like there's something coming and we're preparing and we're prepared for fighting, or we're preparing for fighting. I'm not really sure how to put a ribbon around this, because it's all this mysterious atmosphere there and nothing really concrete that is voice there. The only thing is, Sinclair's back, sort of, with a very weird new hairstyle.
Well,
for me it was weird.
He is on a planet now where there's not a single barber in sight, and we've learned from Dylan that Minbari just do not understand the concept of hair, so it's going to be very hard for him to get a better haircut.
Next time he is rocking the Viking style.
So maybe we can talk about Sinclair's message. I also have a very specific, literal analysis discussion question in the end, but maybe let's just for the first step summarize shortly what his message was all about.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you do that?
I mean, I was still stuck on the idea of the Rangers in general. Meike, you already mentioned they are running around getting information. And for me, this is like the one silver lining of the episode, where we know somebody who has been doing that, Jakar, right? Like, he went into his little spaceship, did an expedition, got almost blown up going to mysterious planets on the rim. And it's just good to know that even now that he's probably going to be busy with this war, he's probably not going to be in a position to do this anymore. Other forces in the universe exist that do exactly that try to follow up on these leads, because, something bigger is happening. And just as we got like a season and a half in advance and information that shadows are moving in the dark, now we get a little bit this thing that, there's but also forces of light that exist out there that are trying to do something. And, it's just in the middle of war declarations and everything going wrong, this tiny little glimpse.
Yes, but that's what I wanted to talk about, because we get this plot of the Ranger and of this message being delivered to Garibaldi and to Dylan. We get that out of nowhere. We don't get any preparation for it, and it just out of nowhere after a few episodes, Sinclair pops up again and doesn't give us much information about what he's been doing or where he's been. But if you think of what he said, look out for shadows. They are waiting for you everywhere, and the other things that he said. Can we see that as a metaphor, or as a metaphorically complicated thing that probably Kosh would tell us? What are the connection points to maybe just this statement and of the things that are starting in this episode right now, although we don't know the big thing yet.
He is definitely sounding more like a Vorlon in this message than ever before. No, I mean, we talked about he has a different hairstyle, he has a different role now. It's very nice, I think, that we get to see this character again, and it's very clear he has been doing stuff. His story has continued. You could imagine a version of this show that follows Sinclair to Minbari and is set there with him, like, building up the Rangers and stuff like that. And I really like that when return cameos of actors aren't there. Say, I've always been here, and here's myself in How You Remember Me again. But it's, no, I've been preparing things. That's very nice.
Yes, so I will answer the question that I just said.
I mean, maybe Meike wants to.
Honestly, I'm a bit out right now.
I was just thinking that we don't know really what is going on. We don't know what is happening on Minbar. We still don't have the big picture, and we don't know what the hell is going on when Vorlons start to speak. But I think that here we see a direct connection between what Sinclair said and what is happening, because we see that this big old conflict, and conflict older than our contact to space already is getting hot again, is exploding again. And we see that the big hope that we had for Babylon 5, maintaining peace, in that conflict for now can be declared as a failure. For that moment, it has not worked yet. And we have this warning that shadows are lingering everywhere. So I just like this connection. It is a super mysterious and indirect and way of saying that, of look out, this is happening, but it kind of shows that this all might be connected, that there is a bigger pattern to it, and that is his only way that he's allowed to tell us that at this moment.
And I mean, it then fits also what we've been saying about the Rangers. They are running around gathering information. So if there is somebody out there who is aware of bigger pictures and patterns, and maybe even could foresee something like this happening, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to buy that it's not a coincidence that this is the Ranger that Garibaldi notices and catches. I think it's very possible that this is somewhat arranged by Sinclair to say, hey, I've looked at all the intel that's been gathered. I understand enough to know things are going to get bad there, so I'm going to send this message now, and I'm going to let him know that this is something. And I think it plays into the same theme that we've been talking about. It's also this reminder of shadows are lingering. There are forces that are making things as bad as they are. Don't just resign yourself to this being the course of the world and you being unable to do anything about that. No. There are shadows. There are things happening, and you can do something about that. And I think in that way, having Sinclair as this cheerleader back for all the good and hope is very, very important, very good. So, having talked about the three big main plots of this episode, we are cutting it a little bit short just because time is limited, our awakeness is limited, but this is obviously something that is going to change the status quo of the show, and we have probably more than a few episodes to look forward to resolving all this, but maybe this is a question that we can already ask ourselves and our dear lurkers. This entire mess that now has been created, this war that has broken out, how, if at all, can this be resolved? If we are in the position of Babylon 5 wants to make peace, how do we do it? And I think that's perfectly fine to leave up for our lurkers for now. We will talk about this in future episodes as this story continues. And until then, where can people find us?
People can find us on Twitter, still on Facebook, where we have our own group, as well as on Instagram. And we have a Mastodon account, but it's not very well taken care of because I'm too busy. We are Third Age Podcast everywhere. People can also find us everywhere where there are podcasts, but you should listen to us here on YouTube, because here you can see us and here we are the cutest.
We hope you enjoyed our more short episode today, and we'll return for the next one.